The prevailing theory is that Hitler shot himself in the bunker.
Nearly half of America believes that Adolf Hitler did not die in Berlin.
In 1945, Soviet troops stormed Berlin expecting to find Hitler's body. What they found instead were charred remains that didn't match his skull. In 2018, French scientists re-examined the so-called proof and found it questionable at best. And buried in a sealed letter from Hitler's sister-in-law was a single line: "He never died in that bunker." From missing teeth to faked deaths, here's what Gretl Braun knew and why she never said it out loud. The sister who knew too much. You ever hear a story so clean it just feels too clean? That's Hitler's bunker. The official version? Simple. Hitler and Eva Braun, married for less than 2 days, say goodbye, take cyanide. He adds a bullet for good measure. They burn the bodies, and that's it. End of the war. End of the man. But not everyone bought that version, especially not Gretl Braun. Now, Gretl wasn't some historian combing through dusty archives. She wasn't a soldier on the front lines, or even officially recorded inside that bunker. But for exactly 40 hours, she was Hitler's sister-in-law. Her older sister, Eva, had just married the Führer inside that very bunker. And Gretl? She was closer to the truth than most people ever got. According to sources who spoke with her much later in life, Gretl handed over a letter to a French historian. The envelope was sealed, marked not to be opened until after her death. When that letter finally saw daylight, it carried a single line that hit like a thunderclap. "I can tell you lies to make you feel better, but the truth is, he never died in that bunker."
I can tell you a lot of lies just to make you happy, but it's not true.
That one sentence, it cracked the whole narrative wide open. But to understand how serious that claim really is, we gotta rewind, way back, to who Gretl was and what she saw. Born on August 31st, 1915, in Munich, Gretl was the youngest daughter of Friedrich Braun and Franziska Kronberger. Her older sister, Eva, wasn't just a pretty face who caught Hitler's eye. She was practically stitched into his personal life. The Braun sisters were tight, that kind of sibling bond that gets stronger in the fire. From middle-class homes to mountain hideouts, they climbed the Nazi social ladder together. By the time Gretl was in her late teens, she was working alongside Eva at the photography studio of Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's personal photographer. That's how both girls got pulled into the orbit of the most dangerous man in Europe. Now, while Eva was playing the role of quiet partner in the shadows, Gretl was the one with some fire. She smoked, openly, despite Hitler hating it. He even tried bribing her to stop, offering expensive gifts just to get her to quit. She didn't. She wasn't afraid to roll her eyes at him. It wasn't disrespect. Not exactly. It was charm. And Hitler? He kind of liked it. He liked it so much, in fact, that he once tried to play matchmaker, setting her up with his adjutant, Fritz Dargis. Except that didn't go well. Dargis made a careless joke about a fly, Hitler got pissed, and just like that, Dargis was reassigned to the Eastern Front. No coming back from that. But Gretl, she stayed in the picture. Then came June 3rd, 1944, just days before the Allied invasion of Normandy. Gretl got married. Not to just anyone, to SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein. That's Himmler's top man inside Hitler's inner circle. The wedding? Huge. It took place at the Mirabell Palace in Salzburg. The guest list? Basically a who's who of the Third Reich. Martin Bormann, Himmler, and yes, Hitler himself. Eva planned every second of it. Receptions at the Berghof, ceremonies at the Eagle's Nest. It wasn't just a family event. It was a political alignment. Gretl was officially cemented into the Nazi elite.
She would argue with Hitler, and after a while, stopped visiting Eva and Gretl at the Berghof when the dictator was at home.
But that fairy tale started unraveling real fast. By early 1945, the war was crumbling from all sides. The Allies were closing in, cities were burning, and Hitler had retreated into the shadows of Berlin. Gretl? She was pregnant and stuck at the Berghof, way up in the Bavarian Alps. Her husband, meanwhile, was holed up inside the Führer bunker with Hitler and Eva. That's when the letter came. Eva Braun's final message to her sister. April 23, 1945. A plain typewritten letter, 2 pages, no fluff. It arrived for Gretl from Eva, and this one wasn't political. It wasn't filled with coded Nazi ideology or wartime instructions. It was personal, urgent. Eva didn't say, hide this document or burn this file. She told Gretl to take care of the necklace Hitler gave her for her last birthday. She asked her to bury the personal letters, destroy everything else, and protect what really mattered. No nationalism, no grand speeches, just a sister trying to make peace before the lights went out. One line stood out. The Führer himself no longer believes a happy end is possible. But naturally, we do not intend to let ourselves be captured alive. This wasn't just resignation, it was preparation. Eva wasn't just saying goodbye. She was passing the torch of memory to the only person she could trust, her sister. And what did Gretl do with that letter? That's where things get blurry. The letter itself? Never found. Historians agree that Gretl followed Eva's wishes to the letter, literally. The documents? Gone. Either buried deep in the Alps or destroyed entirely. At the same time this was happening, Gretl was going into labor. Meanwhile, Fegelein, her husband, was out in Berlin, drunk, dressed in civilian clothes, and trying to vanish. On April 27th, he was caught trying to flee the bunker, hauled back, interrogated, and sentenced to death. Hitler himself reportedly gave the order. And when Eva begged for mercy, for Gretl's sake, it was denied. He was executed the next morning. Gretl, alone in Bavaria, heavily pregnant, didn't even know yet. Her husband was already dead, and her sister was next, April 30th, just 3 days later. The story goes, Hitler and Eva said their vows, made their peace, took cyanide, and in Hitler's case, added a bullet to the temple. His aides wrapped the bodies, took them to the garden, set them on fire, and tried to erase every trace. Soviet artillery was already hitting the city. The clock was running out. Sounds final, right? That's what they say. Otto Günsche, Heinz Linge, Martin Bormann, all reported the same sequence. Later on, the Soviets said they recovered charred remains and matched them to Hitler's dental records. In 2018, a French team of forensic scientists examined the teeth again and confirmed it. No possible doubt. That's what they said, except there was still doubt, a lot of it. Because in the years that followed, the whispers didn't fade. They got louder. Stalin himself insisted Hitler had escaped. Skull fragments the Soviets recovered didn't match. CIA files from the 1950s show American intelligence still chasing down rumors that Hitler was living in South America. Books like Grey Wolf popped up, claiming Hitler and Eva lived out their lives in Argentina and had a daughter named Ursula.
Over the last 72 hours, Animetrics Technologies has analyzed the potential photograph of Adolf Hitler in Argentina after World War II.
There's an algorithm, and it gives a percentage of what are the odds that the two images match.
Mainstream historians rolled their eyes, said it was all nonsense. But the theories kept coming back because people like Gretl never confirmed the official story. She never once went public, never did interviews, never stood in front of a camera to say, yes, Hitler died in that bunker. She didn't say anything, except for that one line. He never died in that bunker. Next up, we follow what happened after the bunker went dark, because Gretl didn't just lose her sister, she lost everything. And what came next? That's when things started getting truly haunted. Gretl Braun's haunted life begins. May 2nd, 1945. Germany was finished. Berlin had fallen. The radio broadcasts had gone quiet. The Reich was in ashes. In a small town called Zell am See in the Bavarian Alps, a woman was holding her newborn daughter. Her name, Eva Barbara. That name alone told you everything, because this wasn't just any woman. This was Gretl Braun. She had just lost her husband, just lost her sister, and possibly, just possibly, she was holding a baby in a world where the most hated man in history hadn't actually died. Gretl didn't scream. She didn't collapse on a stage or write a book like so many others. She didn't speak at all. The world collapsed and she just vanished. Quietly, deliberately. Historians later pieced together what little they could. Gretl changed her name. She left Zell am See. She remarried. Her new husband, Kurt Berlinghoff, wasn't some SS officer or Reich official. He was a local man from Steingaden. Normal, decent, no ties to politics or war. They got married on February 6, 1954, the same day Eva Braun would have turned 42. But even in silence, the bunker followed her. Every new theory, every TV special, every journalist chasing down Hitler in Argentina rumors. Somehow, it always circled back to Gretl. She was the missing link. The one who knew Eva better than anyone. The only living person who had seen the inner workings of the Berghof, who'd married into the SS and lived to talk about it, but never did. And when that letter surfaced, the one she gave the French historian, it wasn't filled with cryptic poetry or political manifestos. It was short, bleak, almost too simple. I can tell you lies to make you feel better, but the truth is, he never died in that bunker. Could it have been metaphor? Did she mean his ideas never died? Possibly. But here's what's strange. Every person who handled the letter noted that it didn't sound poetic or abstract. It sounded like someone trying to unload a secret too dangerous to carry to the grave. And make no mistake, this wasn't the only sign that Gretel's life was haunted. Her daughter, Eva Barbara, grew up in the long shadow of history. She bore a name that reminded everyone of who her mother was, Eva's sister, Fegeline's widow, Hitler's sister-in-law. The child herself, while shielded from politics, could never fully escape it. According to people close to her, she struggled with depression throughout her 20s. In April 1971, not long after her boyfriend died in a car crash, she took her own life. She was just 26. That broke Gretl. She'd already lost her sister, her husband, her parents, now her only daughter. Everyone she loved gone. And yet, she still said nothing, and she kept it that way. Because as much as the historians tried to wrap her up in a nice little post-war package, Gretel's story never really ended. It lingered. The bunker, the letter, that one sentence. "He never died in that bunker." Rokas Misch, one of Hitler's last remaining bodyguards, added fuel to that fire. Before he died, he admitted that he never saw the bodies, that the whole thing was rushed, confusing, that Fegeline's execution was a mess, that Eva's last hours were more complicated than anyone wanted to admit, that Hitler's death wasn't as airtight as people believed. And then came the forensic issues. The skull fragments, supposedly belonging to Hitler, didn't match. One Soviet report said a body was tossed aside because of darned socks. That's the level of chaos we're talking about. Which brings us back to Gretl. She had every reason to be silent, but some historians think she was pressured, that occupying forces told her to keep her mouth shut or risk being prosecuted herself. Others suggest she didn't speak because she couldn't emotionally afford to relive it. Her husband had been executed by her sister's fiancé. Her sister ended her life just hours later, and she was left with a newborn in a defeated country. How do you process that? You don't. You bury it. And so she did, just like Eva asked her to. Gretl died on October 10, 1987, in Steingaden, Bavaria. She was 72. Her second husband, Kurt, passed away in 1999. There were no press reports, no memorials, just a family plot, a simple funeral, and a grave shared with her daughter Eva Barbara and her older sister Ilse. Now Ilse was the odd one out. She never got pulled into the Reich. She stayed away from the SS, from Hitler's circle, from the power games. She married, studied journalism, danced competitively, amateur ballroom no less, and eventually died of cancer in 1979. She made it out. She lived without the smoke of history choking her. Gretl, not so much, because she wasn't just a witness. She was a participant, maybe not politically, but symbolically, absolutely. And the thing about symbols is, they linger, even when everything else burns. And that lingering shadow? It wasn't just about what she saw. It was about what might have happened if Hitler had won, if the war had ended differently, if the bunker had never gone dark. Because Gretl didn't just bury the past. She was supposed to help build the future. And that's what we're digging into next. The chilling role Eva and Gretl Braun were meant to play in the Nazi Empire. So far, we've talked about what Gretl Braun saw, what she buried. But maybe the most disturbing part of her story isn't what happened. It's what almost did. Because if Adolf Hitler had gotten his way, if the walls of the Führer bunker hadn't caved in, if the Allied forces had been just a little slower, then the world Gretl and Eva Braun were preparing to step into wouldn't have been made of rumors or whispers. It would have been real, institutional, global, terrifying, and they weren't just bystanders to that vision. Let's talk about Neuordnung, Hitler's new order. It wasn't a dream. It was a step-by-step plan for what the world was supposed to look like after the Third Reich's final victory. Forget just taking over Europe. This thing went big. We're talking total geopolitical transformation. First, the cities. In Norway, near Trondheim, Hitler planned a mega naval base called Nordstern, essentially a new German Atlantis built to control the North Sea. Hamburg? That was supposed to get crowned with towering skyscrapers, monuments that stretched into the clouds. And in Munich, Hitler's hometown, a 600-foot stone obelisk topped with a massive bronze eagle was already drafted. And it wasn't just about height, it was about legacy. Every street, every building, every statue was meant to scream Aryan supremacy for 1,000 years. Literal concrete proof of racial dominance. Hitler didn't want to just win, he wanted to reshape human civilization. Then came Lebensraum. This wasn't hidden. Lebensraum, or living space, was the foundation. According to General Plan Ost, entire regions of Eastern Europe were marked for erasure. Cultures, languages, identities, all meant to vanish. Millions of Slavic people were to be displaced, starved, or outright eliminated. Their land, to be repopulated with German families. Settlements built from scratch. Towns renamed, borders redrawn in blood. And it didn't stop there. If Hitler had his way, even Britain wasn't safe. Operation Sea Lion, his plan for the British Isles, was already mapped out. The monarchy, obliterated. The country carved into 6 SS run zones. London? No longer the capital. That title would go to Oxford. And Blenheim Palace, of all places, the birthplace of Winston Churchill, was to be turned into Hitler's personal retreat. As for the United States, Hitler wasn't naive. He knew it would take more than tanks to bring America to its knees. But his long game was subtle. Infiltrate, destabilize, divide. Over time, force some version of coexistence. A Pax Germanica ruled from Berlin, tolerated in Washington. This was the world the Braun sisters were getting ready for. Now, Eva Braun didn't hold a military rank. She didn't attend Nazi rallies or write propaganda speeches. But historians like Heike Gerdemaker are clear. Eva wasn't blind. She wasn't some soft, uninvolved girlfriend knitting sweaters while Hitler moved armies. She knew. She was ideologically loyal. She supported the Reich's vision. That wedding in the bunker, that wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a signal. Hitler was confirming her position, not just in private, but in the regime. She was now officially the wife of the Führer. That made her more than a companion. That made her First Lady of the Third Reich. Had the war ended differently, Eva would have stepped into that role fully. No more hiding behind the curtains at the Berghof. She'd be front and center, hosting foreign dignitaries, leading Nazi youth rallies, smiling in government photo ops with little blonde children handing her flowers. She would have been the face of the Reich's feminine ideal, calm, loyal, elegant, and quietly cruel. And Gretl? She wouldn't have been far behind. Her marriage to Fegelein tied her directly to the SS command. She was already familiar to the elite, comfortable at state functions. Groomed for a life of polished appearances and subtle influence. She wasn't going to write policy, but she didn't need to. Her role would have been symbolic, strategic. The perfect German woman standing beside her sister, clapping politely at school dedications, passing out awards at women's leagues, presiding over cultural exhibitions, all while the Reich's real machinery marched forward behind the scenes. Photographs from the Berghof already showed the image Hitler wanted, women smiling in the background, framing his regime in soft-focus humanity. The Braun sisters were key to that vision. They weren't soldiers or politicians. They were facades. But facades make empires look livable, and that's what makes Gretl's story all the more haunting. She wasn't just a witness to the bunker. She was a potential pillar of the post-war Reich. If things had gone Hitler's way, her life wouldn't have ended in anonymity. It would have become mythology. She would have been photographed beside Eva as they toured Aryan schools, handed out medals, symbolized the feminine ideal of Hitler's world. But history took a different turn. The empire collapsed. The obelisks were never built. The genocide was halted, not reversed, but stopped midstream. And instead of rising with Hitler, Gretl fell with him, silently, tragically, and very much alone. And in that vacuum, her real legacy became not what she did, but what she knew. Or maybe what she refused to say. Because the woman who might have been a Nazi matron ended up a motherless, childless, and widowed recluse in Bavaria. And with her last breath, she gave the world one last ripple. He never died in that bunker. Was she clinging to a myth? Was she weaponizing doubt? Or was she, as some believe, finally telling the only truth she could afford to release once the Reich was dead, her daughter gone, and her memory just a fading footnote? We'll never know. But sometimes, the most dangerous people in history aren't the ones who pulled the trigger. Sometimes they're the ones who stayed quiet, buried the letters, and walked away like nothing ever happened. So if Hitler really died in that bunker, why did his sister-in-law say otherwise? Why did the Soviets hide his remains for decades? And why do some files still remain classified? Could the truth be darker than the myth? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you want more stories they'd rather you forget, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.